Hey, it's Rev Walter Mwambazi and another great episode of the 5 major reasons Africa is poor. We're on episode number 6, and today we're talking about culture, or as Rastafarians would say, culture, man. But today we're really, generally speaking, culture is very widespread, so an appropriate description is in order. However, unlike the previous, episode we had, we will keep this one short and, get straight to the point. So culture is, by definition, in the words of E.B. Tyler, that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as member of society. The Cambridge English Dictionary states that culture is the way of life, especially the general customs and beliefs of a particular group of people at a particular time. Now, based on the above definition, we could thus say that all manner and behavior wholly embraced and lived by any particular group of people in a given location over time can be correctly termed as culture. Now, as such, even religion is very much part of culture. However, for this particular series, my men, my ladies that are watching, I have chosen to separate religion because I believe it does a special harm to Africans, and I will be, dealing with it separately. And I can also further say that, the intensification of poverty in Africa can be directly linked to religion. So, well, there you go. Now, meantime, let us briefly look at each one and see it as a component of the whole cultural context of a particular dilemma. So, first of all, we have knowledge, the beneficial application of collective information as experienced and shared by society and passed on from one generation to the next. With the advent of literacy, this has allowed for better preservation and passing on of ideas more consistently. We, however, cannot ignore the effect of poorly funded education sectors and how this in turn negatively affects the proper exploitation of knowledge, of course. The second one is belief. Now, herein lies the greatest enemy of progress and growth in Africa, as far as I'm concerned. And then thirdly, art. This is the preservation of culture in Africa, which has been, generally a painful process. The early Christian missionaries worked against many art forms, declaring them pagan and demonic without fully understanding what they were about. When you couple this with a consistent and systematic reprogramming of locals from their mother tongues to colonial languages, this worked to erase much art which today remains lost in antiquity. Morals, that's the fourth one. Our morals today get more degraded by Western influence, especially through entertainment, specifically through the medium of music and film. Now, most youth now can be seen modeling themselves after their favorite pop, R&B, hip-hop, or reggae icons or film stars, to such an extent that it results in a hodgepodge of lost identity. This coupled with the language that is not ours. I'm sure you've heard people going like, "What's up, dude? What's up, dude?" That's so not African. Anyway, so low. Now, this is the factor that determines the rules of the game. It is a fact that the more complex and fair the laws of a given society are, and the ability to bring justice to those flouting those laws through regulation and enforcement through the arms of government and LEAs, which is law enforcement agencies, the more civilized that society is. Even more pronounced is the general improvement and well-being of its members. Which brings us to the sixth one, which is customs. Now, that's the code of ethics and behavior that forms our very core of being African, by which we are defined. Many tribes have different customs, though they are, relatively similar, especially among black Africans, and hence forge the amalgam known as customs. In spite of all this, we still have evolved cultures that are driving nails into the heart of wealth creation and instead leaving in its wake poverty and suffering. Now, having looked at the full definition of how culture, relates to the context of African poverty, let us now, dig in and see how this is a major, causative agent in perpetuating poverty. Right after this. Right, so let's go into the challenging factors. Now, there is a great enemy of progress in Africa. The enemy that has really siphoned untold potential out of the system and perpetuated mediocrity. That's right. It does not seem to be unending, and if it is not called what it is, retrogressive, it will continue to be a plague to our wealth creation potential and to blot out our progress. Now, the first one is what I term clan-based thinking. Now, this would be defined as a systematic placement of personnel based not on their competence or abilities, but rather on their affiliation by family, tribe, clan, or political attachment or support. Whilst this may look good on the outside for those who wish to promote and support such thinking, it has detrimental effects on the overall development of any nation where this is widespread. Unfortunately, most sub-Saharan African countries perpetrate this kind of thinking. And in some countries, even going as far as outright genocide or xenophobia. Now, let's talk about nepotism and cronyism. In rich countries, whenever there is a job or a position that requires filling, there is a fair and open method of recruitment that takes into consideration skill, experience, abilities, and competence. After shortlisting candidates, only the best is picked for the job. By doing this, they ensure that the best results are guaranteed and the objective for placement is accomplished. When you look at the net effect of this across all industries and sectors, there is massive synergy, and the outcome always benefits the nation's GDP and amplifies their wealth. What is most critical, though, is that even if a person applying is known by the employer, the jobs are usually offered on merit. They pick the best man or woman for the job, period. In fact, there's a term for it. It's called meritocracy. Best man, best woman for the job. Unfortunately or regrettably, that doesn't happen in Africa. Here, we have people that are picked not because they are capable, have the skills, qualifications and abilities, but they are picked because they related to someone or are of the same tribe, clan, or are connected. Whilst this may, be good for those seeking employment and contracts, it is dire for the nations involved. This is also another level of corruption. It is based on the premise that connections come above delivery and results. This is about eating before cooking, reaping before sowing, harvesting before planting. The emphasis is no longer about competence, but loyalty. And the problem with this is that in the end, no results are even considered. Everyone looks out for their interests. What they can amass for themselves. End of story. And this is at the detriment of the nations involved. In Africa, this is usually based on tribe, same region, dialect, clan, which is the same class, family, or roots, or political membership. This practice is widespread all across society, from public sector to private sector. People are picked based not on the above and not their abilities. And therefore, the net output suffers as these individuals simply cannot deliver. This is worst felt in areas where technocrats, experts, and consultant services are required in critical sectors, either in management positions or technical capacity. Instead of placing someone who understands and has the expertise to help solve pressing problems, they get someone who does not even know where to start from, and so they either waffle their way or simply make wrong decisions. This leads to overall underperformance, incompetence, and deteriorating standards. Add it all up at national scale, my friend, and the results are catastrophic. It is such that has been the root behind the inability to see continuity, planning, and strategic execution of policy, as individuals heading or working within these sectors are clueless. This perpetuates mediocrity and ultimately poverty. Now, that brings me to mindset. You see, perhaps the worst enemy for poor countries here in Africa is our mindset. Mindset is defined as the way one looks at something and then goes on to act and behave based on that particular outlook. There has been a major mind-altering work pushed by the system and the ruling class towards the poor in Africa for a long time. This mind-altering agenda has had serious repercussions on the population. The biggest factor that has ensured this mindset is perpetuated is religion. The first is entitlement. Now, this kind of thinking says I am owed a piece of the pie and therefore sits waiting to be given the same. It is aptly referred to as chip on the shoulder, which speaks of someone who has a self-righteous feeling of inferiority or a grudge that demands compensation beyond reason. This thinking expects to receive at all times. It is aptly represented by the common colloquial, "Vatianga nileko." That feels entitled. It is commonly pushed in socialism. Unfortunately, socialism in this author, in this guy, in this man, in this Rev's opinion does not work. Here's an illustration to prove what I'm saying. A class teacher indicates that he is going to mark everyone fairly and gives an average for all efforts performed by a class instead of giving individual marks for each person. In his first test after all marking, the class had an average B+ for everyone, and everybody was happy. As you can imagine, the A students were displeased, whilst the D and F students were over the moon. In the next test, the class average dropped to C. See, the A students did not see any point in working for others, whilst the D and F students didn't even bother. By the fifth test, the entire class got an F as the average. You know what the moral of the lesson is, guys? It's simple. People respond best to a reward system. It's inherently human. And rewards should be given to those that work the hardest. It's called equity. This principle is true even with God, as he rewards according to works and results achieved. There will be no socialism per se in heaven. This is true on earth. All nations that pick this model inevitably fail. The better model is to reward according to work performed, in essence, capitalism. When people realize that their best efforts go to fund lazy people who have not worked, they also choose to do less and less until overall effect is that everyone ends up in the F zone. And the F zone being, F results. So, or fail. Now, the entitlement mentality believes the world owes them something in return, and so sits back and waits for government or organizations like the church to do something and alleviate their poverty. Unfortunately, reality does not operate like that. If one does not work, they shall not eat. Those are the words of St. Paul. Life rewards those that work. Now, let's talk about the dependency syndrome. According to FinScope 2015 report, about 1 in 5 adults in Zambia are dependent in homes. Can you believe that? This is yet another facet of the entitlement mentality. In the 7 Principles for Financial Prosperity, my book, I have the 7 common reasons why people get into debt, and at number 3 is subsidizing a lifestyle, under which we have what I coined the Messiah complex. Now, this is where breadwinners try to become the messiahs of their families and are burdened with taking care of virtually all their relatives. I show clearly that this perpetuates misery and poverty because family members tend to have the above entitlement mindset, which, sees them sit around waiting for the Messiah to provide. Over time, this can have serious negative impact on wealth creation. Progressive nationalities have learned to synergize with their efforts for betterment of the entire family. Unfortunately, a large percentage simply sit around and wait for their benefactor to bring in the dough. Which takes me to the next aspect of culture, which is the job paradigm. This is another extension of the entitlement mentality. In this case, the problem is intensified by the education system that creates job seekers to feed the industrial system instead of identifying and allowing children to specialize early through determining what their aptitude is and when their greatest potential is. Instead, we have one-size-fits-all style of education. It rewards left-brainers, those are, analytical, methodical, and memorizers, instead of also considering right-brainers that are creative and abstract. It focuses on getting everyone to learn so much that is irrelevant instead of specializing in what is suitable. You see, the result is lost potential and wealth. The result is kids get into school with the paradigm, go to school, get high grades, and then get a good paying job. But then, how many of those are available? Like, for real? See, the world is now changing. Gone are the days, except in the civil service, when you showed up, clocked in, hang your jacket, shuffled some files, and got paid. Now the time has come, my friends, when pay is pegged to performance. There's a term in performance called key performance indicators, and these are the language of the corporate sector. Numbers, bottom lines, profits, dividends, shareholders are what matter. If the numbers don't add up, then you get downsized. That's like for real. Which is a nice term for being retrenched or let go. This has made the rich countries prosper immensely and seen the overall effect benefit everybody. Poor countries focus on resource pilferage, nepotism, and these coupled with corruption have ensured perpetuation of poverty. Which brings me to another group. We call them the receivers. This is another part of our culture. You see, for me, this is another bomb, where we have decided to always be receiving. The Bible declares that it is more blessed to give than to receive, and yet we want to be receiving all the time, hands out, begging bowl out there. This has meant that the giver gets more blessed, whilst the receiver gets the lesser blessing, the immediate satisfaction of the need, but not the ending of the problem. See, in rich countries, most citizens have learned to become a resource, meaning they give more, they help solve problems. They have an obsession within their area of calling. They are working. Below are some of the differences I'm going to outline between a job and work. Listen to this. Jobs are what you do because you have to. Work is what you do because you love to. Jobs are what you do because you have to survive. Work is what you do because you want to thrive. Jobs are what you do to earn a living. Work is what you do to earn your destiny. Jobs are fueled by needs. Work is fueled by passion. Jobs have a salary as their incentive. Work has destiny as its incentive. See, based on that, we can see that we need more people to become a resource, not dependents. Poor Africans suffer from dependency syndrome, always waiting for some savior to come and save us. This is the song even in politics. This dependency syndrome has been drummed into people from the times of the missionaries. I blame them. See, religion has been a key culprit that has enforced this thinking, and the overall results can be seen today. I have some news for all of us. We need to simply wake up and stop the dependency mentality. We need to realize that the only way we can emancipate ourselves is by becoming resources. The word is resourceful. In the words of the 34th President of the United States, JFK, he said, ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Become a resource. Become a source of progress and strength. Start your journey towards your destiny. Seek what is that God has placed inside of you. We are the change we seek. Nobody is coming from outside to help us. And even if they do, for as long as we want to go around the world with a begging bowl asking for handouts, we forever will be cursed to remain dependents, looking for messiahs to come and save us. But if we realize that God has given us all the resources and abilities and also the wealth in our ground, and then we get out there and begin to work, then we will see wealth begin to accumulate and grow. Then we will see our nations become wealthier. Then we will see our people blossom. Our GDP will increase. Our grounds will become richer. Our work will speak for us, and our prosperity will become a reality. Next week, we go into religion, my friend. And that's a whole Pandora's box.